Speaking freedom, giving you the answers to be free. Be free.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's performance is about to begin.
Hello, 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 and welcome to Speaking Freedom TV. We are back with another episode of Journey to Freedom. And today our special guest is Mr. Terry Tucker. Hey Terry, how you doing?
Casey, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Terry.
Sure, born and raised on the south side of Chicago. I am the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me, but I'm 6'8" tall and actually went to college at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina on a basketball scholarship. When I graduated from college, I'm really going to date myself now. I moved home to find a job because this was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. Fortunately, I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. That was the good news. Bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. After Wendy's, actually, it was not an easy time for the whole family. After Wendy's, I actually went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother. And then at 37 years old, made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And part of what I did during my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT hostage negotiator. After that, started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball when we lived in Texas. But for the last 12 years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer, a rare form of melanoma.
Oh, that is heavy. So I am sorry to hear that you're battling that. I definitely want to start out with saying I pray that you win the fight and that you start your recovery process sooner than later.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, so what are you doing right now as far as work? Like, what brought you to us today?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, a job or employment, I really haven't worked since 2012, since I was diagnosed with cancer. But one of the things I learned from my father having cancer, my dad had end-stage breast cancer back in the 1980s, and they really didn't know how to treat a man with breast cancer. And they told him pretty much to go home and die. And he lived another 3.5 years, and I believe he did because he had a purpose. He was into real estate. He really enjoyed real estate. He actually worked up till 2 weeks before he died. And I sort of tucked that in the back of my mind and said, well, when it's my turn in the barrel, so to speak, I need to have that purpose. And so I've learned a lot during these 12 years of having cancer and also in my life in general. And I just wanted to offer it to people. And, I started a speaking business, and then COVID hit. And like so many other organizations, I had to figure out a different way to deliver my message. And I had a friend reach out and said, hey, you want to be a guest on my podcast? And Casey, honestly, this is what I said. I said, sure. What's a podcast? I had absolutely no idea what a podcast was. And he explained it to me. And I said, all right, I'll try it. And honestly, I was terrible. My first podcast, I was horrible. I had Post-it notes all around the camera. He'd ask me a question. I'd kind of lean in and read. Like I said, I was horrible. But I enjoyed it and I liked it. And so I tried to get better at it. I tried to develop better stories, see how many times I said huh or or all those filler words that we use. And that started me. I'm probably approaching 700 podcasts that I've been a guest on all over the world. I've had a tremendous experience. But that's kind of how I came to you today, is because we connected on Matchmaker, and it's a great podcast app that brings guests and hosts together.
Okay, so do you have any books that you've worked on since you've started this journey of being a speaker?
I did. In 2020, I published my first book. Last Christmas, I wrote a chapter in a book that was published, and I'm actually really putting the finishing touches on the second book, the entire book that I've written. So I enjoy writing. It's something I don't know if I'm good at. I always talk, I'm kind of a simple guy who writes simple books. They're not real in depth, but it's something that I enjoy doing, and it's something that gives me a purpose.
So when you were diagnosed with cancer, how did you go from diagnosis to motivational speaker?
So when I was diagnosed in 2012, I was told that I would more than likely be dead in 2 years. And I thought, well, you gave me a death sentence. Maybe I could turn that death sentence into a life sentence. And that's really what I've been trying to do. I was on a drug for 5 years that left me terribly sick every week. I had my foot amputated in 2018, my leg amputated in 2020. I still have tumors in my lungs that I'm treated for every 3 weeks. So I spent a lot of time as a cancer patient. And so my off times doing podcasts like this, writing and things like that, it gives me that purpose and it gives me that energy that allows me not to sit around and say, oh, look, woe is me. This is terrible. I need to have something productive to do. So I've learned things during this journey. And I've always said, I've learned a lot, but the two of the biggest things I've learned are number one, I don't think you really know yourself until you've been tested by some form of adversity in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, and this may sound weird to your audience, but cancer has made me a better human being. It's allowed me to focus on the things that are truly, I think, important in life. And I've been asked several times, if you could live your life over again and not get cancer, would you do that? And honestly, Casey, I don't think I would.
It is ironic that you say that. I am a disabled veteran. I've been disabled for, oh man, I've been out of the Army for 20 years. So I've been disabled for 20 years. And over the years, different things have occurred where it has gotten worse. I dealt with thyroid issues that really wiped me out, really. It was just a lot going on, especially as a woman with the hormone changes that happen with your thyroid. I went through and I can say I was down to about 113 pounds at one point. Probably about 12 years ago, I got down to about 100 and 13 pounds. I was always very lethargic, very tired, just barely able to move. But in that time, of being allowed the space to not have to work to take care of myself definitely created a purpose within me, a fire within me that was like, you know what? I can't sit around here and be upset, depressed, or mad, or bitter, or angry that I'm going through these changes. But what I can do is figure out what I can do with myself in those changes. And when you become displaced, quote unquote, from work and the mindset that we are raised with, especially when we were older generations. You're a little bit older than me, but before I'll say the 90s and back, you were raised with the mentality of you had to work in order to live. And so when you don't work or when you have a job that's not demanding, it makes you feel like you're missing out on life, like something is wrong with you. And it took me a while to get through it's nothing wrong with me. I just need to see what God placed inside of me that I'm supposed to be using so that I could fill the void. And that is how I came about doing podcasts and helping people on IG. I know I briefly talked to you about how I got to here, and that was the start of it because I studied psychology. I did all of these things. So I had a lot of information. I'm a veteran. So it's just a lot of knowledge there. And when the time came, it was like, okay, well, what are you gonna do? And helping people was the narrative that propelled me. It was, helping people identify their areas of weaknesses and behavior pattern struggles and making a better way for them to attack life and the things that were attacking them. And it really was a life-changing experience. So when you say that cancer changed your life, sometimes for the better, it is a lot of things that people don't understand when you start living a life that you could take easily for granted. When you don't have challenges, you don't have a reason to develop, you don't have a reason to grit and bear and go internal to say, okay, what's up here? Because without that, not saying you can't do it without it, because I don't want nobody to think that you got to struggle in order to develop. But in some cases, without that, you have no reason to go within, because there's so much fluff that we live and experience in society, whether it's work, clothes, shoes, all these things that can kind of shadow who we are. And it is a blessing when we experience something in life that allows us to really get down to the core of us.
It absolutely is, and you're absolutely right. And you're right. You didn't grow up listening to, I'm a victim. You don't have that victim mentality. You're like, I'm going to figure it out. And maybe that came from the military, maybe that came from your family, however you grew up and things like that. But I've seen, and I'm sure you have as well, a lot of people that just kind of fall back into that, oh, woe is me. Look at me. Life is terrible. Nothing's right. Everything's horrible. And it's like, that's not me. That's, I mean, yes, I got cancer, but I think I can use that to make the world a better place. And I always say, I have a very strong faith in God that God can use my weakness to show his love and greatness and power. And I'm certainly willing to allow him to do that. Not that I really have a choice. He can do whatever he wants, but in a lot of ways, I am open to, I'll work in partnership with you, Lord, and whatever we can do to make people's lives better, I'm all for that.
It's funny because you have to be at that place to be open, to really be able to be used. And it's a daily opening, because you might wake up and you don't feel like being used. So even if God sent you to do something, you wouldn't even be open to it. And a lot of people don't really take account to, it's a daily decision to be open to the blessings of God, the work of God, and everything that has been purposely placed into our lives. Because I believe that everything that we got going on is by design. Some things, are by choice, but the choice within the design, So when we begin to understand that and kind of navigate those mindsets and the way we think about how we navigate life and how we look at life, it really is a changing experience. Because aside from that, we will shrink and we won't even realize, okay, I am, no matter where you are in life, you are exactly where you're supposed to be. It's just, will you get the lesson in that area so that you can get to where you're supposed to go?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, somebody had a saying one time that said, everything that's happened to you today has been waiting to happen since the beginning of time. And if you think about that, how, in a lot of ways, magnificent we are, but also insignificant that we are with the billions and billions and billions of people that have been on this planet. But at the same time, understanding that there has never been, nor will there ever will be, somebody as unique as me, somebody as unique as you, and the people that are listening to us. We are that unique, but at the same time, when you look at it in the big scheme of the world or the universe, it kind of puts things into perspective for you.
It does, and I also like to understand how all things work together, because although I'm here, there is something that could be going on 1,000 miles away that will still affect my life in a way to where we're all small particles in the big universe, but we're all the universe as a whole. So it's like, yeah, you could survive without one particle, but it will definitely throw off the ecosystem.
It will. And it's interesting when talking about, technology and podcasts and things like that. I had a young man about 6 months ago reached out to me on email, and he said, I just listened to one of your podcasts and I really needed to hear it. It was something I needed to hear today. And I said, great. I said, what was the name of the podcast? And he told it to me. And Casey, I didn't remember. I had to go back and look at it. It was a podcast that I had done 2.5 years ago that he had found at the moment that he needed to hear it. And so, these things that we're doing today, while they're being done today, they're evergreen. 10 years from now, somebody may listen to this podcast and be like, you know what? I needed to hear that message that Terry and Casey put out in the world on that particular day. So, don't think that whatever the things that you do today don't matter. You never know what impact they're going to have on another person's life somewhere down the road.
I definitely truly believe that. And I say that because when I talk to you about having so many episodes of really conversations to myself, just thinking out loud about things and sitting on them. I sat them for a long time. I sat on them for a long time. And then it was a gentleman, a rapper by the name of Nipsey Hussle that got killed. And when he got murdered in LA, for whatever reason, a light bulb came to me like, okay, you've been sitting on all of this content.
Hi, I'm Dr. Casey. Not your typical clinical doctor. I am an ordained minister, but not your typical minister. I am also a certified life coach, love coach, sex coach, solution focused coach, transformation coach, and more. I have a whole lot of information that I would like to help you grow with. And I hope that soon I can help you be the best you that you can be. Confidence, spirituality, and purpose. That's wholeness. Complete.
For a long time. It is time to put it out because guess what? You might not get a chance to put it out again, and you don't want your kids to have to do the work that you were supposed to do because they got work that they were supposed to do. So you need to go ahead and put it out. And that's when I started, okay, let me start small. Let me do it here. Let me see how it works. Let me get a feel for it. And then I transition into what we have now. But it really took for something to say, hello, don't let it sit because somebody might need it. So even if I don't get 100 views tomorrow or 1,000 views next week, it could be 10 years from now and it's 1,000,000 views out of nowhere and I wasn't even expected. And that would still be a blessing because at the time that it was needed, it was there. And I find myself sometimes beating myself up about not doing things fast enough, but I've had to learn to allow the time to be what it is because I was, well, I could have released all of these before COVID and they would have had stuff. But if it in COVID, they might not have needed that at that moment. But when the next big thing hits, it'll be there and it'll be available. And I would have had the experience to kind of push what the message is supposed to be.
Yeah. And I've always said small minds and weak people kill big dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And you had a big dream and you didn't let a small mind say, oh, I can't do that, or nobody's going to care. This isn't important. No, it is important. What you did was important. It was important for you. It was important for who knows who's out there that listened to that. People, so many people, it's always said that the richest real estate in the world are our cemeteries because they're areas, rich in businesses never started, books never written, relationships never pursued. When you go to the cemetery, don't have any of those regrets.
Right. And that there is definitely true. So what has been the hardest thing to conquer in this challenge of overcoming cancer and launching a new career? What has been the greatest challenge in that? And how has changed you?
Yeah, it's really it's sort of a balance right now because I get treated every 3 weeks for the entire week at the hospital. So I'm out of commission. There's really nothing I can do during that time. And then I get 2 weeks off. And I try to cram as much life as I possibly can into those 2 weeks, knowing that, well, when that third week comes up, I'm back at the hospital again. So a lot of it is controlling my mind, controlling the thoughts, the mindset, the things that I'm thinking about. And, I don't feel good today, or I'm nauseous or whatever it is. It's like, you know what? I don't care if you're nauseous. Keep going. Get up, do things, do what you need to do what you think you're supposed to do today. So it's sort of like, being at on the teeter-totter when we were little kids and at the park, and you're like,
So do you give yourself time to rest?
No. No, my wife and I have this discussion all the time. She's like, your blood counts are low, you need to rest. And my response is I get plenty of rest when I'm dead. So, I don't want to, I don't want to rest because what energizes me, what gives me that purpose is doing things
He's
like this,
doing.
is writing, is being on these
Mhm.
podcasts. Yes, it's tiring, but at the same time, it gives me energy
Mhm.
that I wouldn't have if I was just sitting around resting, so to speak.
I mean, and I asked about rest, not because I would encourage you to not pursue what you're doing, but how do you balance in rest in the grand scheme of things, whether it is okay, you might work and do interviews or do your work for a certain amount of time, and then this amount of time you give yourself a moment to relax because rest is important when it comes to your body healing and getting the energy replenished to keep going.
You're right. It is. And don't get me wrong. When I finish this podcast with you, excuse me, I will end up taking probably about an hour, hour and a half. I do some breathing. I do some tone therapy, and just different things, meditating, praying, things like that. And I will do that for about an hour and a half.
Hmm.
And then I've got another podcast tonight that I'll be doing in that. So you're right. It is a balance. It's like anything else in life. You can't just load up on doing one thing all the time,
And I'm
24.
sure that third week when you're in the hospital, that's rest enough because listen, I had sepsis. I was in the hospital for about 3 weeks and it was the worst rest you could get.
Yeah. You don't rest in the hospital. I don't know how anybody gets healthy
Yeah,
in the hospital, you
I
know?
mean, it's the worst rest you can get, but it's the only time that you are forced to be still. So
Yeah.
I understand that being forced to be still on that third week, it gives you the okay. Now, when I get out of here, it's time to go. And sometimes that is what keeps us alive. It
Yeah.
keeps us going, and it keeps us able to live longer than what they told you could live because you're not allowing the defeat to set into your mind. And a lot of times when you get diagnosis and when you get certain treatment plans, the defeat sets into your mind before your body even really takes effect to it, and that sometimes makes it a more strenuous thing versus those that are able to do like yourself. You're conquering, you're overcoming. I mean, of course you're still in treatment, but the process of being in treatment and still fighting for your goals and still going after your purpose, that is the definition of overcoming in my book.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I always say doctors are kind of like Vegas. They
Hmm.
sort of play the odds.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
okay, a person of your age and your
Hmm.
health
Hmm.
with your stage of cancer is going to live X. But
Yeah.
what doctors don't know is that you want to see your child graduate from high
Hmm.
school and from college, and you
Hmm.
want to walk them down the aisle, in when they get married, and you want to see your grandkids. And those events in your mind, in your head, something to look forward to, those things can keep people going. Those things
It
are,
really can.
they really can. And, people think, how can they do it? It's amazing. If you can control your mind controls your body. And if you can't control your mind, you go off on all these tangents about how terrible life is and I'm
Hmm.
going to die and the doctor
Hmm.
said this. The doctor doesn't know you.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying the doctors aren't right from time to time. They are,
From time to time.
as you know, yeah, they're not always right, and you
Hmm.
can do things to help yourself live longer and live better.
I definitely agree with that because it just takes um applying what you get from the doctor with what you know about your own body
Right?
and then having that sense of a purpose when it comes to your family. But I think a lot of times in order for that narrative to work, you actually have to have a relationship in those areas so that you can have something to shoot for,
Right.
because if not, the reason why it's easy to focus on short-ended things is because you hadn't built the bonds to where you had the hope to be able to see, if that makes sense.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So how has this experience, I know you said that it made you a better person, it really enlightened you a lot. How do you think it has affected your relationships and with the people around you?
Yeah, I think disease in general, whether
Mhm.
it's cancer or something more chronic or things like that, they tend to isolate us.
Mhm.
I think initially from your friends and then potentially from your family. And then if it goes on long enough, potentially from yourself. And I always talk about what's gotten me through these 12 years of cancer are my three F's: faith, family, and friends. And I told you I have a very strong faith in God. And I'll give you kind of a funny story about my family. When I had my leg amputated and found out I had these tumors in my lungs, my doctor wanted to start me on chemotherapy. And I remember saying to him, "Is it going to save my life?" And he said, probably not, but it might buy you some more time. And I said, well, if the outcome's going to be the same, if I'm going to
Yeah.
die anyway, I don't think I want to do that. But I'll go home and I'll talk to my family about it. So I go home and it's just my wife and daughter and I. And so I start telling them what the doctor wants to do. And my daughter's like, all right, we need a family meeting. I'm like, family meeting? There's three of us. It's not like we got a board here or something like that, you know? But we sit around the kitchen table and individually talk about how we feel about me having chemotherapy. And then when we're done with that, my daughter's like, all right, let's take a vote. How many people want dad to have chemotherapy? And my wife and daughter raised their hand. I'm like, wait a minute. Am I getting outvoted for something that I don't want to do? But I remember when I was back in the police academy, our defensive tactics instructor used to have us bring a photograph of the people we loved the most to class. And as we were learning different techniques to defend ourselves, we were to look at that photograph because he reasoned you will fight harder for the people you love than you will fight for yourself. So I ended up taking chemotherapy, not because I wanted to, but because I love my wife and daughter more than I love myself. And in hindsight, it was the right thing to do. It was the bridge that got me to the medication, the drug that I'm on now. And then I'll just say this lastly, there were people that I was 100%, friends that I was 100% sure that if something bad ever happened to me in my life, they would be there for me. And when I got cancer at 50 years of age, they were like, nope, 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 can't deal with this. I got to back away. I've got to back out. And Casey, that there have been people who I never expected to be there for me that have never left my side in these 12 years. So faith, family, and friends are really what has gotten me to this point in my life.
And that's beautiful, because I know that feeling. The same type of narrative when my thyroid issues started, and you hear the whispers and the people trying to figure out what's going on, and instead of being supportive, and hey, I know you're going through some things, whatever I could do, type of thing. Definitely was a well. I don't know. You normally the person that everybody go. Well, that's why I need somebody. You're exactly right. So I definitely understand that. If there was one thing about your life that you could change, what would that be? Now we already know that you probably wouldn't take away the cancer diagnosis, but if there was one thing in your whole life that you could change.
I, I mean, I would probably say, although I wouldn't change anything, but I would say that the things, if I had to, if you're forcing me to make a change here, I guess I would say I would take away all the unnecessary pain that I caused people because I was focused more on myself and less on helping other people. I
That
guess
is
that's what I
the
would.
the most selfless answer that I think that I've gotten thus far. And I appreciate that. Um, for someone that hears this, even if they don't know you, something like that could go a long way because you don't really hear people regret how they hurt other people or how they've treated people. So I appreciate you for having that type of mindset that if you could take anything away, it would be the way you treated people.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
that that's powerful. Um, if there was some advice that you could give someone right now, be it a cancer patient or just a young person that's trying to figure out how to move forward in life, what would that be?
I guess I would say this. I think it's more important in your life who you work with and who you work for than it is the work that you do.
Mhm.
Find people that care about you. Find people that are willing to invest in you. Find people that want to see you succeed. Hitch your wagon to those people and climb your mountains together.
That's great. What is the title of the book that you said you wrote, and when can we expect the new one?
The first book I wrote was called Sustainable Excellence, The 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. The new book, I don't have a title for it yet, but I'm hoping that it's out first quarter of next year.
Okay, so I would just like to say I'm sitting here and I'm listening to your voice, and you have a great voice for like narration or anything like that. So, I would definitely, if you were interested, look into like doing audiobook narration. I think you have a wonderful voice.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's good to know. There are those days, and you got the raspy. I'm like, "Ugh." But I definitely appreciate that, and I will check that out. Thank you.
No problem. So tell our viewers how they could find you and where they could purchase your book at before we go.
The book can be bought anywhere you can get a book online: Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, Apple iBooks, wherever you get your books online. You can get Sustainable Excellence. And I have a blog/website called Motivational Check. Every day I put up a thought for the day. And with that thought usually comes a question about maybe how you could incorporate it in your life. I have recommendations for other books to read, videos to watch. You can leave me a message. That's all at motivationalcheck.com.
I am so happy to have had you here today, Terry. And I really do wish you well in your journey because you are battling a lot and you wouldn't know it if you didn't. If you wouldn't have told me that you were living with cancer and actively seeking treatment to overcome the diagnosis, if you would not have told me that your leg was amputated, of course, I can't see your legs, but based on your spirit and your personality, I would have never known because you don't carry it, you don't wear it on you, and that in itself is a blessing.
Well, Casey, thank you very much for saying that and for having me on your podcast today. And I hope our conversation brings value to your audience.
Thank you so much. Okay, everybody, until next time, it's been great.
Hi, I'm Casey, Dr. Casey. Welcome to Speaking Freedom. We are happy to have you, and we hope that we are able to help you in every way possible. Have a good evening. If you've enjoyed this video, like, share, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. New episode every Friday.